Let's now bring in Anthony Bainey. He's with the Green Party locally. Anthony, thanks for joining us. Glad you're here.
Thank you for having me on.
Eventually, I want to talk about Hillary Clinton and Jill Stein here, but let's continue this whole theme of ballot access and how hard it is for minor party candidates to get on the ballot. You are running for state senate?
Oh, no, state assembly.
I'm sorry, state assembly. What district?
140.
And how did you get on the ballot? How hard was it for you? If it's based on percentages and there aren't many Greens in Western New York, I think we could argue that for you it was a lot easier than it was on the federal scene for Kevin, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're in a major party, there's a lot more members in that party, and the bylaws, help get their politicians on the ballot. So there's also which party has endorsed which candidate, too, because you'll see some primaries there might be a two or even sometimes a three-way race.
And
so that helps influence who gets chosen for the primary, too, is if the party has backed that person. But it is harder when you're in a district with a large amount of Republicans or even Democrats to get that certain percentage of votes. And it is a higher percentage for a federal election.
So in your case, what did you get? How did you do it? It was a percentage of the registered Greens, right?
Yeah, it was 5% of the registered Greens in my district, and I was able to double that. It does take a lot of work, but you really have to, get down to the grindstone and go door to door with those calls.
Now, the New York State 140th Assembly District, that's Robin Schiminger. That's basically North Tonawanda, parts of Tonawanda, little bit of North Buffalo. How many Greens are in that district? How many did you have to get?
Yeah, there's 300, so I would have had to get 15.
That's quite a contrast to what Kevin was saying. Either Kevin,
Absolutely.
Kevin Stocker as well. 15 votes, you're on the ballot. You got 30, and you've got a cushion twice that?
Well, I'm not on the ballot yet. I am going to have the primary, so that is going to be an interesting scenario.
Okay, a primary in the Greens alone? I thought okay.
There's a Republican who's registered as, she was registered as a Republican, and she switched to the Greens, so it's going to be a very interesting primary.
And that's where the common theme comes out. If you're already a Green and this person's a Republican, talk to me about what the two Kevins were saying. Do you feel the system is in any way stacked against you?
I don't believe that it is, because I'll be able to organize the Greens to support me. They know who I am. However, I can see in the two major parties how they are stifling out competition, either at the party boss level or even by the fact the whole party endorses one candidate.
In New York State, it's all called fusion, the idea that a Republican can, in fact, run in the Green Party primary. You okay with that?
Like I said, I think that if we organize the Greens, we will reject these people who do not share our values. But the Green Party at the state level does not support fusion voting, and we try our best to keep our line green.
I got to ask the obvious question about the uphill battle here. Would you be the only Green legislator in Albany if that was the case, if you were to go ultimately to victory here?
That would be true. I would be the only Green in the state assembly, and there is a Green Party member in the state Senate, but he's cross-endorsed as Republican and independent also.
How tough of a battle? Let's move on to the general. Let's say you end up on the ballot. How hard of a battle do you see yourself having here?
Well, it's going to be very hard. I mean, the Democrats and Republicans have their own money coffers, and we don't take corporate donations as the Green Party. We're not influenced by major corporations. We're influenced by our base, by the citizens in our district. So it's very hard to beat somebody in a general race that has absorbent amounts of money, more money than you do.
And the district you're running in, 140th, that's a seat currently held by Democrat Robin Schiminger, and has been held by Robin for a long time. He's the most senior state legislator in office locally.
And if you listen to the constituents in his district, they are extremely displeased with the way that he has been acting in the assembly. There's even been times where he doesn't even show up for votes, and he has no problem with that.
How much of the district is Democrat right now?
I would say that southern part, so the North Tonawanda district, is more conservative Republican, it seems like. And then the more southern part of North Buffalo and Tonawanda and Riverside, I would say, would be more liberal.
All right. Now, on the local ballot, are you the only Green that's challenging in the state elections?
I don't believe so. But, I mean, we also don't know who is actually Green Party if they're in other parts of the state because of the fusion voting.
Okay.
But we do have U.S. Senate, Robin Wilson. She's running against Schumer.
All right. Now, if let me try to put the other argument forth for fusion. As long as it's just party people that are voting, isn't it an okay thing to have more candidates on the ballot, be they Republican or Democrat or whatever, running as Green? More challengers means ultimately a better candidate. Is that an argument for fusion, regardless of whether these challengers are initially registered as Republican, Democrat, or Green?
I mean, my position is that as long as everybody, the majority, let's say the majority of the people in that party agree with that candidate because they share their values, then I don't see a problem with that. But if they're using fusion voting as a way to knock off lower party candidates and not giving them an option to run on the general election ballot for their constituents to have an actual choice, then I don't think that's fair. I don't think that supports democracy.
Is it a matter of trying to knock you off, or is it a matter of just trying to give themselves more options because every line that's there ends up being a place where people could vote for them?
Well, every case is different, too. I mean, I would say that most politicians want to get on as many lines as they can. However, it could be strategic in a certain campaign to knock somebody off.
I see. Okay. Well, after this, let's take a quick break. I want to talk to you a little bit about Jill Stein and the national races as well. You were at, I understand, the convention last week, the Green Party convention, or did you meet Jill Stein somewhere else?
Yeah, I met Jill Stein at the state convention in Troy. I didn't happen to make it down to Houston. It's a little bit hot down there.
All right. After the break, we'll delve into that. We'll talk about whether there's a sentiment out there that really feels you could peel away votes. Jill Stein could end up, in fact, hurting Hillary Clinton to the benefit of Donald Trump. More to come. Anthony Bainey is with us. He's running for state assembly on the Green Party line. He's also very active in Green Party circles, so I thought it would be interesting to bring him in and chat with him in just a little bit. After the top of the hour, by the way, we're going to talk much more, obviously, about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. We'll bring in Jacob Nieheisel from University of Buffalo, Political Science Department. A lot of calls there, too, so stay with us. It's Hardline on News Radio 930 WBEN. Anthony Bainey is with us, running for New York State Assembly in the 140th District as a Green Party candidate. He's active in the Green Party locally, and that gives us a chance to talk to him about some of the bigger issues that are percolating in the presidential race. Anthony, thanks for sticking with us. This is almost a rhetorical question, but stick with me. Do you support Donald Trump?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Do you support Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate for president?
Absolutely, 100%.
Do you think Jill can win?
I think that it is possible. No election should be predetermined 90 days before. Anything can happen. You have two candidates that are at the major level that are or have faced investigatory charges. So I think that at this point it's way too early to even say who could win.
All right, because the reason I asked the first question about Donald Trump is if you don't support him, is there a part of you that feels pulling votes toward Jill away from Hillary helps him out?
Well, I don't think anyone can really argue that because there are Republicans that do feel that the environment is out of control right now, that we have a climate change issue that we really need to tackle. And I think that some Republicans will actually vote for Jill Stein also.
But if you don't want Trump, it sounds as if you're setting up a scenario that, to my mind, would help him out, no? By siphoning votes off Hillary Clinton.
Well, like I said, I mean, we have two candidates right now that have or are in the middle of investigatory cases. So we really don't know what's going to happen right now. I mean, even if the penalty is civil assets, then, I mean, that affects the campaign. So
you're counting on Trump dropping out or Clinton, being indicted or in some way removed from the ballot?
I can't predict those election results, but all I can say is that you can't make a decision on who's going to win 90 days before the election. I feel like that was how the Democrats were going after Bernie so far before the primary was even held.
What are the differences between Bernie Sanders and Jill Stein? Is she a safe haven for those voters that might have wanted him?
Absolutely. I mean, Jill Stein is completely against foreign military interventions that are destructive. So, I mean, we have military interventions right now in Syria and in Iraq, and they're not working. They're only creating more terrorism. So Dr. Jill Stein is against these military interventions by defunding them. You know, we fund radical terrorism in the Middle East, so she is for defunding these. We didn't really hear too much of that coming from Bernie Sanders. He spoke of coalition military interventions, which were the same words that George Bush Jr. had used to go into Iraq.
Do you see Sanders organizers, not just rank and file folks, but Sanders campaigners now jumping on the Stein bandwagon?
I have seen a few of the organizers and even supporters going towards Jill Stein.
On the national level, and I do get what you said about not wanting to really rule anything out 90 days in advance, but do you have any sort of prediction for me?
I don't. Like I said, the federal election this year has been so crazy. It's been crazy.
Talk about the other side. If Jill Stein is seeing some support from Bernie supporters, do you feel that perhaps Gary Johnson on the Libertarian side can pull votes away from Donald Trump? I guess what I'm asking is do you feel this is a year where the minor parties make a difference?
I actually do feel that way. I mean, we have right now the issue of will any of the two lesser candidates even get on the debate stage? And if you talk to most Americans, they say absolutely. If they're on more than 45 ballot states, then they should be heard by the American public. People are very upset that they are not exposed to other candidates than these two candidates that we have on the major parties. And so it only stands to reason that the Commission on Presidential Debates should allow them into the debates. Because if you were to hear the two other voices, Americans would not stand for the two unrational voices that we have at the top right now.
Debate rules, as I understand them, they have to reach a threshold that I think is 10% before they get on the main stage. Is that right?
It's 15%.
15,
However,
okay.
The co-chair of the Commission on Presidential Debates in an interview said that he could allow some leeway towards one of the candidates, who I would assume would be Gary Johnson, who has been polling over 10% in some polls.
So at this point, based on that 15% benchmark, Jill Stein doesn't have much of a chance, does she?
Well, she's actually been hitting 7 and 8% in some polls, so I think that it's really too early to say when the debates aren't until mid-September, and the co-chair even said that he wouldn't be formulating his decision until around early mid-September.
You talk about status in the polls. There's one other question I need to ask you about. Because polls are oftentimes trying to be representative. If they look at the makeup of the nation, they say, okay, hypothetical numbers here, 40% Democrat, 60%, 40% Democrat, 50% Republican, 10% minor. Are polls, just by the demographic nature of them, biased against your candidates because they're a smaller amount of people, do you think? Do you see my point or my question?
Yes and no, because, I mean, if you ask any pollster, any study can be skewed depending on where you were targeting more of the country. However, most polls are pretty honest about which region they're targeting. Like Gary Johnson tends to do better in the Midwest, and Jill Stein does better in the Northeast. But those polls will, if you look at the information that they provide, say where those came from.
All right, Anthony, we're almost out of time here. Any closing comments? Anything I didn't ask that you really wanted to stress or mention?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest issue right now, and this is my big issue in my campaign, is the legalization of cannabis, because, I mean, we're talking about ballot access, we're talking about the two parties just restricting ideas that most Americans support. And if we look at the polls for legalization of cannabis throughout the country, the overwhelming majority support medical legalization, and even a strong majority support recreational sales of legalization of cannabis. So it's one of those issues that these parties are really cutting out of the discussion during this election. I don't think that that's fair at all. And
it's a case where both the Libertarian and the Greens are on the same page on that one, aren't they?
Absolutely. They are mostly on the same page. I mean, once you start getting to state laws, it could differ a little bit. But, I mean, most of the Libertarians and Greens agree that we should not be arresting people for small possession of cannabis. All right, Anthony, interesting stuff. Glad you could join us today. Thanks so much. Absolutely. Have a great day. You too. That's Anthony Bainey with the local Green Party. He's also a candidate for Assembly in the 140th District, Tonawanda, Robin Schemenger's current seat.